Imagine this. You wake up one morning and something in you is gone. Not broken, not in pain, just absent. The same alarm goes off. The same light filters through the same curtains onto the same floor. But your body rises without asking you first. It brushes your teeth, makes your coffee, checks the notifications. It smiles, answers emails, responds to voices. It does all the right things, but you're not there. You used to be. You remember the feeling, raw wonder, defiance, aching hope. You remember laughing at things not because they were funny, but because they cracked open something eternal inside you. You remember crying, not from sadness, but from the unbearable beauty of being alive. Now, you don't laugh like that. You don't cry like that. You nod, you produce, you perform, you play along, but your soul, it has stopped. Not dramatically, not in protest, not with fire or fury. It's simply disengaged, slipped behind the curtain. Like an actor who's done reciting lines that never felt like his in the first place. Have you felt it? That subtle vanishing? That quiet betrayal? Where one day, you're not sure if your choices are yours, if your beliefs are yours, if your love is even yours. You look in the mirror and realize the face you see is still playing the part, but no longer remembers the script, or worse, knows the script too well and has grown disgusted by its predictability, and yet the world claps. You're successful, you're functioning, you're saying all the right things, doing all the right things, but something inside you whispers, this isn't living. This is survival dressed in performance art. What happens when the soul grows tired of pretending? When it refuses to inhabit the identity it once co-created? When it no longer finds itself in the career, the relationship, the religion, the self-help affirmations it once found purpose in? And what if, here's the terrifying thought, this isn't depression, trauma, or burnout? What if this is clarity? What if the soul's silence is not a sign of dysfunction, but a sign that it has finally woken up and chosen to not play along? That the illusion has simply worn too thin. You scroll past inspirational quotes, hear the word authenticity thrown around like confetti at a corporate party, but nothing about your existence feels real anymore. Even the desire to escape feels manufactured. Even your rebellion is pre-approved, market-tested, and spiritually branded. What does it mean when even your awakening feels staged? What do you do when the compass you trusted, your passion, your ambition, your sense of self, points nowhere? This isn't about nihilism. It's not about giving up. It's more frightening than that. It's about realizing that the game you've been playing, the role you've been rehearsing your whole life, was never written for the full, raw, divine intelligence of your being. And the more you excel at it, the more invisible you become to yourself. Is this what maturity is? Learning to suppress the unreasonable parts of you, to silence the voice that once screamed with unbearable dreams? Is maturity realizing that the world was never meant to contain your soul to begin with? You wonder if anyone else feels it, the vague unease behind their eyes, the subtle tremble in their laughter, the forced enthusiasm in their voice, the soul hiding behind the personality, the truth trapped beneath the performance. Everyone's playing along, not because they believe in it, but because the alternative feels like standing on a stage and saying, I don't know who I am, while the audience keeps applauding anyway. You want to scream, stop clapping. This isn't me. This was never me, but you don't. You smile. You say thank you. You play along because the show must go on, right? But somewhere deep down, there's a part of you that stopped clapping too. And maybe, just maybe, that part of you is the only part that's real. What happens when that quiet, watching presence decides it will no longer animate the mask? What happens when the soul stops playing along? The world doesn't prepare you for that question. Psychology tries to diagnose it. Religion tries to moralize it. Capitalism tries to monetize it. But none of them can answer it. Because to face it requires a brutal honesty that dismantles everything you thought was sacred. It demands a confrontation not with despair, but with truth. A truth so raw it tears through the costumes of your carefully crafted identity. And so you sit there, staring at the mirror, waiting. Not for the old self to return, but for something older than self to awaken. The real question isn't, what's wrong with me? The question is, what if nothing's wrong? What if your soul has simply remembered that it was never meant to fit this small, exhausted version of life, and now it's waiting for you to catch up? You were never taught how to listen to silence. Not the silence of a quiet room or the stillness before dawn, but the deeper silence, the kind that echoes when the soul withdraws. No one warned you that one day your inner world might grow tired not of pain but of falsity, that even joy, when manufactured, when commodified, becomes a kind of noise, that eventually the soul, like a wild animal caged for too long, stops responding not out of weakness but as an act of refusal. This is not burnout. This is not a phase. This is the beginning of a reckoning. But to understand why the soul retreats, you must first understand what you've been trained not to see. You live in a world obsessed with optimization, with functionality, with self-improvement metrics and mental health checklists and spiritual progress reports. But beneath the gloss of all that progress lies a deeper wound, one ancient, systemic, and psychological. A slow amnesia about what it means to be whole. Carl Jung called it the loss of soul, the slow erosion of connection to the deepest parts of ourselves in favor of personas designed to survive society. He warned that modern man is in search of a soul, not because it vanished mysteriously, but because we exiled it in the name of adaptation, to fit in, to succeed, to be loved. Think of your childhood. Think of the moments you were too loud, too curious, too emotional, too strange, and how the world around you gently, or not so gently, asked you to adjust, to shrink, to simplify yourself into a manageable version, a version that didn't make others uncomfortable, a version that could play along. And so, slowly, the fragmentation began. You learned which parts of yourself were good and which ones weren't. You built a mask out of smiles, ambition, and strategic silence. You played roles: the dutiful student, the charming partner, the ambitious professional, the enlightened seeker. But behind every performance was a growing absence, a part of you that wondered, is this really me? Schopenhauer believed that much of human suffering comes not from misfortune, but from self-deception, from building a life on desires that were never truly ours. The will to live, he said, often disguises itself as purpose, but it's merely a repetition of craving and delusion, leading us in circles. You begin to want what others want, to dream what others dream. You internalize borrowed ideals and call them destiny. Is it any wonder that eventually the soul gets tired? This is not weakness. This is not dysfunction. This is existential intelligence waking up in a world that has trained you to doubt your inner voice. Nietzsche once said, He who has a why to live can bear almost any how. But what if your why was never yours to begin with? What if the soul stops playing along because it no longer wishes to serve a false why? One handed to you by a culture that values productivity over presence, certainty over curiosity, appearance over essence. The hidden problem is this: modern society demands masks and rewards those who wear them best. But the soul is allergic to the artificial. It speaks in myth, in paradox, in dreams that don't fit into PowerPoint slides or 10-year plans. It doesn't want to climb a ladder. It wants to dissolve the building. And so it rebels, not with violence, but with silence. It shows up as numbness, restlessness, the sudden sense that your passions are hollow, that your relationships are performative, that your beliefs no longer fit. But we're taught to pathologize these moments, to medicate them, to interpret them as symptoms of disorder. Rarely do we ask, what if the soul is right to withdraw? What if this is the most honest thing it can do in a dishonest world? Viktor Frankl, who endured the horrors of the concentration camps, insisted that man's deepest need is not comfort or safety, but meaning. But meaning cannot be outsourced. It cannot be injected into a life like a motivational drug. It must be uncovered, often painfully, through confrontation with the void. And that void is where your soul now waits. You see, the real danger isn't pain. It's numbness masquerading as normalcy. It's the slow fading of your essence beneath the routines of adulthood. It's calling that fading growing up instead of what it truly is, spiritual attrition. Jean-Paul Sartre believed that humans are condemned to be free, that we are burdened with the terrifying responsibility of creating our own meaning. And yet, we've been taught to flee that freedom, to accept narratives handed to us instead of forging our own. And that's the hidden poison. You've been told your soul's rebellion is a flaw. But what if it's the only thing keeping you alive? What if the ache you feel is not a call to fix yourself, but to remember yourself? To peel back the layers of who you thought you had to be, to confront the possibility that you are more than what you've become, to ask yourself questions that no job, no relationship, no ideology can answer for you. Not what should I do, but who was I before I learned to obey? Not what's the next step, but what if I stopped walking the path entirely? What if the very thing you fear, losing your identity, your status, your certainty, is the doorway to something deeper than all of it? Not reinvention, but reclamation. Your soul is not gone. It's waiting, waiting for you to stop explaining it away, waiting for you to risk disappointing others to tell the truth, waiting for you to break the spell of normality. And remember that aliveness is not a checklist, it's a revolution. And so the tension grows. You are not broken, you are being summoned. The next question is no longer why the soul stopped playing along. It's what happens when you finally decide to join it. What happens when the soul stops playing along is not always visible at first. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks or even with a loud scream. Instead, it seeps into the cracks of everyday life like a slow, insidious fog, shaping your reality in ways you don't yet understand. You might think the soul's withdrawal is a private matter, a hidden wound lodged deep in the psyche, personal and contained. But the truth is far more unsettling. This silence resonates outward, coloring not just your individual experience, but rippling into the collective human condition. Consider this: our brains, those astonishing organs that weave perception from chaos, are wired to adapt to patterns, to fit reality into comfortable narratives. This phenomenon, cognitive bias, is the reason we seek confirmation rather than challenge, comfort rather than disruption. It's also why the soul's quiet rebellion is so easily ignored or explained away. Your mind whispers, "This is normal. Everyone feels this sometimes." Your culture nods knowingly, "It's just stress, it's just depression, it's just a phase." Your routines clamor, "Keep moving, keep producing, keep distracting." But beneath that chorus lies a crucial paradox. The more the soul retreats, the more your mind doubles down on superficial fixes, the deeper you fall into a feedback loop that feels inescapable. Neurologically, this is no accident. The brain's reward system is designed to keep you alive by reinforcing habits, often at the expense of your inner truth. Dopamine spikes from social approval, from achievements that matter to others, dull the yearning for genuine connection with your own self. The patterns of distraction, screens, noise, consumerism, are not random. They are engineered to anesthetize the soul's ache. And the consequence? A growing gap between who you are and who you appear to be. This gap breeds what psychologists call existential alienation, the feeling that your outer life no longer matches your inner reality. You perform your role in the world, but the script feels hollow. Your emotions flatten, your relationships lose depth. Your work feels like a treadmill, not a calling. This is not a mere mood swing, it is a profound psychic fracture. Culture itself is complicit in this fracture. The world, in its rush toward efficiency and globalization, demands conformity. Individuality is commodified, turned into a brand. Even rebellion is packaged and sold. The soul's true voice is drowned out beneath the clamor of curated identities, viral trends, and endless content streams. The result is an epidemic of disconnection masquerading as connection. Social media connects billions, but how often does it deepen your sense of being? How often does it invite you to confront your raw, unfiltered self instead of a pixelated version? Philosophers have long warned of this dilemma. Aldous Huxley foresaw a society addicted to distractions, where depth is sacrifice for pleasure and meaning evaporates into spectacle. Jean-Paul Sartre argued that in fleeing freedom, people lose themselves in bad faith, adopting false roles to avoid facing their authentic existence. You may live in that very bad faith without realizing it, clinging to identities, beliefs, and routines that keep you safe from the terrifying vastness of your own soul's silence. But silence, as you've already sensed, is not emptiness. It's a signal. And when the signal is ignored, the consequences multiply. On a personal level, this leads to what neuroscientists call allostatic load, the wear and tear on your body and mind from chronic stress and emotional suppression. It manifests as anxiety, depression, chronic fatigue, even autoimmune disorders. Your body remembers the dissonance your soul feels, even when your mind pretends it doesn't exist. On a societal level, the consequences are no less dire. Collective soul fatigue breeds apathy, cynicism, and social fragmentation. When millions stop playing along, not with a loud revolution, but with quiet withdrawal, the fabric of community frays. Politics becomes performative. Institutions become hollow. Empathy atrophies. You see this every day in the yawning gap between what people say and what they truly feel, in the rise of escapism through technology or ideology, in the relentless cycle of outrage and indifference. Here lies the cruel paradox. The very structures designed to keep us safe and connected often deepen the soul's exile. The more you conform, the more you numb. The more you numb, the less you can connect. The less you can connect, the more isolated you feel. And the more isolated you feel, the more desperately you cling to performance. It's a spiral disguised as normality. But what if it's not normal at all? What if what you are experiencing is a profound evolutionary signal, a cosmic pressure forcing humanity to wake up or break down? Here is the urgency you cannot afford to ignore. When the soul stops playing along, it's not a breakdown. It is a breakthrough in waiting. It demands that you stop running from your truth, stop anesthetizing your pain with distractions, and face the raw, unvarnished self beneath your social mask. Yet, the longer you delay, the more entrenched the illusion becomes. Cognitive neuroscience shows that the brain's plasticity is a double-edged sword. While it allows transformation, it also hardens pathways of habitual thought and behavior. The more you resist the soul's call, the harder it becomes to hear it. This is why most never move beyond the fog. They keep playing along, clutching their illusions, numbing their longing. But the soul's silence is a silent scream. It's the whisper that won't be silenced by self-help slogans or therapeutic quick fixes. It asks, are you willing to see what has been hidden? To feel what you have denied? To live beyond the roles you have been assigned? If not, the price is paid in years of quiet despair, years of going through the motions, never truly alive. If yes, the path forward will demand everything you thought you knew must be undone. And yet, within that terrifying surrender lies the seed of rebirth. The soul's refusal to play along is not a sign of defeat, but an invitation to reclaim your life on radically new terms, to rewrite the script with the full presence of your being, to discover that beneath the masks, beyond the distractions, is a source of power and truth no one ever taught you how to access. This is where the unseen consequences meet the possibility of transformation. But first, you must see the trap of playing along, and why breaking free is not just an option, but an imperative. It doesn't begin with a shout. No banners, no grand speeches, no dramatic exit from your job, your marriage, your beliefs. It begins in a whisper, a subtle flickering defiance, a refusal to pretend, a moment of eye contact with yourself that lingers too long in the mirror, a thought you can no longer unthink. I'm not who I've been pretending to be. This is the beginning of rebellion, not against society or family or systems, but against the inner machinery of falseness you've upheld for years. But here's the truth most people won't tell you. To break free is not to escape. It's to confront, to unlearn, to risk everything you've built in the name of someone you barely remember. And yes, it is terrifying. You were trained to equate identity with continuity, that who you are is the sum of your titles, your memories, your relationships, your routines. But rebellion demands you drop the anchors and let yourself drift into the unknown. This is not recklessness. This is honesty in its purest form. Friedrich Nietzsche once said, "You must become who you are, not who you were told to be, not even who you think you should become, but something deeper, raw, and untamed. To become who you are, you must do the unthinkable, step off the stage, drop the performance, let the silence grow louder than the applause. But how? How do you rebel when your entire life has been shaped around playing along? The first act of rebellion is awareness. You stop lying to yourself. You stop numbing. You allow the discomfort to speak, not just through your thoughts, but through your body, your dreams, your gut-level intuitions. You no longer dismiss them as irrational or weak. You begin to trust the language of your soul, images, symbols, instincts, as a form of deeper intelligence. You start to track the moments you feel most alive, and the moments you go dead inside. Noticing becomes a kind of sacred practice. The second act is unmasking. You begin to peel away layers, identities that once kept you safe, but now keep you small. This means questioning not just your career or your lifestyle, but your deepest motivations. Why do I seek praise? Who am I trying to impress? What do I fear would happen if I stopped pretending to be good, smart, or in control? The answers aren't intellectual. They come like fragments, like old bones rising through the soil of long-forgotten feelings. They feel ancient, primal, and at first, profoundly destabilizing. Because rebellion, real rebellion, is a form of death. You die to your past selves. You die to the story that made you palatable. You die to the illusion that you ever had to be someone to be worthy. And in that death, something stirs. Not a new persona, not a shinier mask, but a presence, a being, a sense of I am that needs no justification. But here's where it gets counterintuitive. Rebellion isn't loud, it isn't angry, it isn't fueled by resentment. True rebellion is stillness in the face of noise. It's choosing silence when expected to speak. It's saying, I don't know, when certainty is demanded. It's leaving a room full of comfort to enter the wild unknown of authenticity. Take examples from history, not the revolutionaries with guns, but the inner rebels. Søren Kierkegaard, who abandoned the safety of religious institutions to wrestle openly with doubt and despair. Simone Weil, who left academic success to live among the poor, feeling that only through embodied suffering could truth be known. Krishnamurti, who walked away from a global movement built to worship him, saying, truth is a pathless land. Their rebellion wasn't destruction. It was departure. Departure from pretense, from systems, from the seduction of certainty. You too must depart. Not physically necessarily, but psychologically. You may still go to work, still speak to family, still do your tasks, but you begin to bring something new to everything. Presence without performance. You say what you mean, even when your voice shakes. You feel what you feel, even when it's messy. You admit not knowing, even when silence makes others uncomfortable. You begin to live without explanation. This doesn't make life easier. In fact, it often makes it lonelier for a while. Because most of the world is still playing along, and those who stop become unsettling to those who don't. People might say you've changed, that you're different, distant, too intense. Let them. Your task is not to reassure them. Your task is to become true. As Carl Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But he also warned that this privilege comes with a price: descent into the unconscious, confrontation with your shadow, dismantling of your persona. You can't skip that descent. You must face your shame, your rage, your grief, the parts of you you've exiled in order to be likable, safe, normal. Only when these are integrated can you begin to move through the world, not as a performance, but as a presence. And presence is the most radical rebellion of all. because it cannot be manipulated. It does not seek approval. It does not beg for permission to exist. It simply is. And in its stillness, it calls out to others. It becomes contagious. When you stop playing along, you give others permission to question their own charade. And suddenly your rebellion becomes something bigger than you. It becomes a ripple, a mirror, a movement, not with slogans or ideology, but with something far more subversive: authenticity. This is how the soul begins to return, not as an external rescue, but as an internal resurrection. It recognizes your truth. It meets you in your courage. It walks with you, not ahead or behind, but within. And the game that once demanded your compliance begins to collapse. Not because you destroyed it, but because you stopped feeding it your energy. You stopped pretending, and now something deeper can begin. Something final, something whole. What if the soul never wanted to play along in the first place? What if everything you thought was rebellion, the courage to walk away, the silence you finally embraced, the unraveling of identities, was not a fall from grace, but a return to something primordial, pre-language, pre-society, pre-self? What if the soul's silence wasn't a breakdown, but the last honest voice in a room full of liars? Here is the truth, the one you've been circling like a ghost in your own life. You were never meant to play the game. Not the game of chasing worthiness. Not the game of curated lives and conditional love. Not the game of shrinking your spirit to fit inside systems that reward obedience and punish depth. You were never meant to barter your essence for applause. Never meant to shapeshift for belonging that was never real. Never meant to become fluent in a language that has no words for the sacred, the broken, the wild. The soul stops playing along because it remembers. It remembers being before doing. It remembers stillness before story. It remembers truth before strategy. And that's the unbearable realization, isn't it? That all the effort, all the becoming, all the years spent polishing your mask were never necessary. That what you are without effort is not lacking, it's eternal. This is not self-help. This is not a better mindset. This is not a 5-step program. This is ego death. This is looking in the mirror and realizing the one who sought transformation was never real. The you that wanted to be more confident, more successful, more enlightened, that you was always a construct, a scaffolding of trauma, culture, reward, and fear. The soul doesn't want to be improved. It wants to be remembered. And what it remembers is unbearable to the mind because it makes the mind obsolete. The soul knows you are not a story. You are not your thoughts. You are not your history. You are not even your personality. You are presence. You are awareness. You are the witness to everything, not the actor on the stage. When the soul stops playing along, it's trying to wake you from the dream of form, the dream that told you, I am this body, I am this job, I am this identity. But you are not. You never were. You were always the space behind it all, the field of consciousness in which the actor arises, the light that reveals the shadow, not the shadow itself. This is the ultimate truth, and it is terrifying, not because it's false, but because it's too true. It renders your old life incomprehensible. It strips you of excuses, of ego, of victimhood. It demands you stop seeking and start seeing that you are already whole, seeing that the soul's silence was not abandonment, but invitation. An invitation back to the only home you've ever truly had, the present moment, not the past you regret, not the future you chase, not the identity you build, but now the raw, unfiltered presence where nothing is missing. And here's the paradox. When you stop needing to be anything, everything flows through you. When you stop striving to be whole, you realize you were never broken. When you stop looking outside for God, love, meaning, you discover they were inside all along, disguised as your breath, your awareness, your stillness. You become like a tree that no longer tries to grow, it simply grows. Like water that doesn't seek direction, it simply flows. Like fire that doesn't need permission to burn, it simply is. This is freedom, but not the freedom to do anything. It's the freedom to no longer need anything, not validation, not security, not even purpose. This is freedom, but not the freedom to do anything. It's the freedom to no longer need anything, not validation, not security, not even purpose, because the soul is not a servant of meaning. It is meaning itself. And when it stops playing along, it's calling you to stop living for something and start living from something, from stillness, from truth, from being. You no longer chase experiences. Experiences arise through you. You no longer ask, what should I do? You ask, what wants to move through me right now? This is the death of the separate self and the birth of the sacred self, the self that cannot be defined, only lived, the self that sings through silence, that dances through grief, that prays through breath. And then something strange happens. You return to the world, not as the actor, not as the seeker, but as the open sky in which all things arise. You can have a job again. You can fall in love again. You can feel pain again. But now you are none of these things. You are the space that holds them, unshaken, unnamed, infinite. This is the final rebellion, not against others, but against illusion itself. Not to escape life, but to finally enter it, not with armor, but with naked awe. Because when the soul stops playing along, it's not giving up on life. It's inviting you to begin where you are, to begin as you are, to begin without needing to be more than the miracle you already are. So ask yourself now, in this breath, what would happen if I stopped playing along? Who would I become if I no longer needed to become anything? What would be possible if I trusted the silence more than the noise? You don't need the answer. The soul is not a question to solve. It is a presence to inhabit. And when you do, when you stop playing along, you realize you never left. You were never broken. You are not late. You are exactly where the soul has been waiting for you all along. Home, in the mystery, in the silence, in the truth that doesn't speak, but is. And finally, you understand, not with your mind, but with your being. You don't need to play the game. You are the field on which it was imagined. Now, exhale. Let go. The soul is here. And it's been waiting for you to stop pretending, so you could finally begin to live.